Academy Award-winning movie star Joan Crawford sat glamorously at the head table of a Pepsi-Cola luncheon I was also attending on the day of November 22nd, 1963, in Dallas, Texas. Just the night before, I had met former Vice President of the United States, Richard Nixon, and his wife, Pat Nixon, as I went through the receiving line for a cocktail party Pepsi-Cola gave at the Baker Hotel. John Kennedy had narrowly defeated Nixon in the 1960 presidential race. So why was Nixon in Dallas the night before Kennedy was assassinated? Because Nixon, who was an attorney, was legal counsel for Pepsi-Cola in 1963, and that's the only reason. And Joan Crawford, why was she attending the luncheon? Because as widow of the chairman of the board and chief executive officer of PepsiCo, she had become an executive on the board of Pepsi too. She had flown in on Wednesday night and told newspapers she might not attend the luncheon. But there she sat, only feet away from the table where Miss Dallas and I, Miss Big Spring, 1963, sat with other Pepsi-connected individuals. Richard Nixon, Joan Crawford. It was a star-studded event until a man announced into a microphone, "President John Kennedy has just received last rites by a Catholic priest." "That does not mean he's dead," a man stood and said loudly so that everyone could hear. "I am Catholic, and last rites are often given while someone is in serious condition. However, the person may recover after last rites." The man at the microphone said, "No, the official word is that President John F. Kennedy is dead." Instantly distraught, Miss Dallas exclaimed, "Oh no, Dallas is ruined! Dallas is ruined!" Her concern for the city she represented impressed me. I remember thinking, no wonder she is Miss Dallas. She really cares about the city and its image in the world. So how did I, winner of a small-town local pageant as Miss Big Spring, end up in a world of movie stars and vice presidents on this historic day when the President of the United States, John Kennedy, was tragically murdered on the streets of Dallas? Well, in 1963, Pepsi-Cola was the sponsor of Miss America and its state and local pageants. Miss Dallas and I crossed paths with the local titles we had won while we were competing at the Miss Texas pageant in July 1963, and we were both students at nearby North Texas State University, now known as the University of North Texas. So, along with Miss Denton, Miss Dallas and Miss Big Spring, me, were hired as Pepsi hostesses for the prestigious American Bottlers of Carbonated Beverages Convention in Dallas and for the Pepsi-Cola Bottlers Association, all for the week of November 18th through the 23rd, 1963. A Dallas television station covered the convention and zeroed in on me wearing my Miss Big Spring badge, filling up a cup of Pepsi and handing it to people who came to our booths. All the girls where I lived in Denton gathered around the one small black and white television set one of the girls had and cheered excitedly when it showed me. They were so sweet and supportive. The convention was an exciting event. Bottlers from around the world filled the mart, and every soft drink company was represented there. Then the Pepsi-Cola Bottlers Association moved out of the Dallas Trade Mart. A luncheon for President John Kennedy was being held at Market Hall that next day. Instead, we were at the Baker Hotel that historic Friday, and a room was reserved for us girls to change clothes and freshen up if we needed to. On that day, as we stood at our service table near the top of the Baker Hotel, a young public relations assistant said, "I am going to see if I can find a window where I might catch a view of the president's motorcade from up here." A few minutes later he returned, frowning, and said, "I didn't see anything, but I could have sworn I heard gunshots." "Oh, don't start something like that," said another man who stood nearby. "It was probably just firecrackers." None of us thought anything more about it. until we heard an announcement from inside the ballroom next to us where the convention was taking place. "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, but the president has been shot and is being rushed to Parkland Memorial Hospital. We will immediately adjourn. However, the luncheon is already set up a few floors down for those of you who are expected to attend. We will keep on top of this." Immediately, the upset crowd poured out of the meeting past our table. A man shouted into my face angrily, shaking his fist, "You Texans are nothing but a bunch of damned barbarians!" And then he rushed away with the crowd. At first, we were stunned, but knowing we were being paid to attend the events, I went to the luncheon, as did Miss Dallas. And now, sitting at the table, hearing that President Kennedy was really dead, Miss Dallas exclaimed again, "Dallas is ruined by this," and she left the table, following others who also exited, leaving their food untouched. I felt a serious concern that there was more to this than we knew, and that our country was in grave danger. Then I realized there was a television in the room that had been reserved for us, and I could learn more about what was going on there. I left the table and went to the elevator and stepped inside with about 3 other people. Suddenly, Joan Crawford stepped inside the elevator with a man who had been at her table. "I must get to Mrs. Kennedy," Joan Crawford said urgently. "I will find out if there is any help I can offer." She looked at the man accompanying her. "What is the name of the hospital?" He shook his head, and no one else on the elevator answered. "Parkland Memorial," I finally answered. She nodded at me. "Thank you." I later heard that Joan Crawford tried to make contact with Mrs. Kennedy, but that she was turned away. In the hotel room, I sat alone and watched the constant coverage of the day's events for several hours. At last, realizing I had not eaten, I called downstairs, but the restaurants were temporarily closed because of the assassination. I went outside to see if I could find a place to eat, but I could not believe what I saw. Dallas, a city normally teeming with noise and vitality, was completely shut down, dead. Stores were closed, and there was absolutely no one on the streets. Not one store was open, not one. It was as if all the people had simply disappeared, and I was all alone. It was eerie and a little creepy. There was no traffic, no cars driving, no buses on the road, no pedestrians, just me. And then I heard the sound of the street light above me click as it changed from red to green. That's how quiet it was. Typically, Dallas traffic was so noisy you could never hear the lights change. But now, as I crossed the hollow and empty streets in the shadow of tall, closed buildings in this ghost town of Dallas, I saw one item, a lone sheet of newspaper dated November 22nd, 1963, tumbling toward me with a blaring headline. "President dead